Good morning and welcome, everybody. Thank you for registering for today's quarterly update from HotStats. I'm Jane Pendlebury. I'm the CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. It's Wednesday, the 4th of February, and it's 10 a.m. We're due to be chatting for around 30 to 40 minutes today with time for questions, so we should be finished before 11. Please do ask questions throughout using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And if there's not enough time to answer your queries, we will get back to you afterwards. The webinar is being recorded and we're happy to share the link afterwards, and it will also be available on our website as usual later this week. I'm pleased to welcome both Michael Grove from HotStats and Tina O'Hara, Commercial Director from the Cairn Hotel Groups. Cairn Hotel Group. Can I ask you both to introduce yourselves briefly so that everyone understands the expertise and experience of our panel today? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So Michael Grove, CEO of HotStats. Yeah, like 20 odd years in hotels now. Only ever done hotels. Spend most of my time now keeping the industry up to date with what's going on from a revenue and profit performance point of view for the industry.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tina?
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name's Tina O'Hara, Cairn Hotel Group. I've worked in hospitality for over 30 years now. I worked with a number of independent brands and been at Cairn Hotel Group for over 10 years. We've got over 30 hotels across the UK, so a mix of independent hotels, branded properties, and anything from bed and breakfast options to conference-driven hotels and country house hotels. So a real mixed bag.
Brilliant. Thank you. Michael, should we hand back to you to give us some facts and figures?
Yeah, sure. So I decided this time, as it's 3 months ago, we kind of did the last update, that I wouldn't spend too long on the performance numbers, but I think it's also useful to just get the final update for the year. I will caveat it slightly with the fact that we had quite a large uptake in the UK this year from a hotel numbers point of view. So we've revisited the slides, so as in rebuilt the like-for-like sample that I use for this. So there are a few changes to the previous slides, but this is the kind of most up-to-date view with a larger sample for the UK performance. So hopefully you can see my slide deck right now.
And we can see your notes page at the moment, or that looks great.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, just kind of looking at the final views. We're looking at December numbers right now. January numbers will be out in a few weeks' time in February. So yeah, as we look at the picture for 2025, I think there's quite a few stories that we'll be able to pull out of the numbers, both the ones that I'll be reiterating some of the things we've already mentioned. It'd be useful now with having Tina on the call. I think we've had a few discussion with finance people, for instance, on how it looks from the cost management side of things and the overall picture. I think now we can look at some of the commercial views. I still think, the biggest opportunities for hoteliers in the UK is to look at our commercial strategies and try to see how we can deal with the operational headwinds. Of course, I will quickly do my update on where we are from a HotStats perspective. So we have the tools available to help you kind of navigate the view of what's going on in and around yourselves. So, for instance, I'll give you a view of the UK performance and maybe some market performance. But if you want to look at how you're comparing against your individual competitors, we have the options in benchmarking. And if you're looking at either opening new hotels or repositioning your hotels, we can also provide data in new markets where you don't currently operate. And of course, as we come together with Duetto, the exciting things that I'm currently working on in the background now to keep everything fresh and exciting. Of course, Duetto, mostly known for the revenue management space at this moment in time, moving towards profit management. And of course, the marriage of these two businesses, I think, helps complete that story quite well. So many more updates to come. And of course, get in touch if you want to learn more. And that's my uncomfortable sales pitch over. So if we look and chop up the UK into 4 quarters, which is what I was doing for most of last year for a few good reasons, going over old stories here, but Q1 was really a difficult start for the UK. From a performance perspective, we ended up roughly flat from a revenue point of view and negative from a profit perspective. That 6% increase in labour costs year on year, we thought would get a lot worse as we ended Q2. As we saw the changes to government policies. The change wasn't significant, and we spoke quite a lot about that at length on the previous webinar that you can go back and listen to as we navigated some of those ideas that hoteliers had put in place, some of the tough decisions and structural changes they had to make in order to be able to navigate those. So the size of the increase was not overly dramatic between Q1 and Q2 for labour costs, but another 7% drop in Q2. Q3 was much more exciting. As you can see there, put it down to a really good summer. But of course, as you can see there, the 4% growth we saw on the top line basically flowed through to the bottom line overall, 4% growth from GOP par perspective. And then in Q4, you can see here that kind of 3% growth the UK saw converted into a 2.3% flow through on the bottom line. If you look at the total picture for the year, so I mean, the way I've put this is you can look at it in two different halves. So if you look at the first half of the year, very, very challenging. Q3 got much more positive. We did wonder whether it was just down to that kind of really positive summer performance, but actually we finished the year pretty strong. So if you look at the second half of last year, we are entering 2026 with a pretty positive position overall. Now, if you take a view of the whole year, as I guess the investor community will generally do, you can see that 2% up on the top and 1.1% down on the bottom. A lot of it driven by this challenging labour cost growth in these difficult times. If you look at the revenue performance across the board, and this is where I come to from the opportunities, you've seen this slide before if you've seen our presentations, but I really kind of want to labour that point that, the rooms performance 1.1% up for the year. You can see there, food and beverage, the combination of those two sits around 1.9% growth overall, food and beverage and conference and events combined. If you look at golf and wellness, again, further growth there. And if you look at the ancillary number there as well, 7.5% growth in ancillary revenues overall, pretty positive again, and something worth spending some time talking about. Now, if you look at the C&B performance across the nation, well, it's a real mixed bag. You can see that, I put this, the orange lines are looking against 2024, blue is against 2023. So you can see overall, it's split right the way through the middle. So UK performance is mostly flat year on year. You can see some markets really excelled between this year and last year, and quite a few markets there at the bottom have seen some tailing off of C&B performance. And then my favorite graphic, and I'm not going to get to use this very much, I fear, over 2026, but yeah, you can see that if you look at if you haven't seen this graphic before, what it's actually doing is the right-hand side of the graphic is telling you those markets that have seen a growth in revenue, and the top half of those that have seen an increase in profitability. So the top right segment is those markets that have seen a growth in both, and you can see there's not many, it's a handful of markets that have seen a growth in revenue and profit. The bottom left are those markets that have seen a decline in both areas. So, most markets sitting around that middle ground where there's been a little bit of revenue growth and a slight profit decline, which, as you saw on the previous slides, was basically the average for the UK. I'll highlight Cardiff because I don't underplay how proud I am to be from Cardiff. And you can see there on the right-hand side, again, incredible growth, a lot of it linked to the amazing amount of events that we saw in 2025. And you can see there, the red line that I've indicated, or I think it's orange, just under 3% growth. There's a pattern there for those markets that saw over that kind of, I think it's 2.7% growth, saw a growth in profitability. Those under that mostly saw a decline. And then if you look at the labour costs across the board, so again, I just highlight this because I think it's quite a go-to for us to assume that the largest growth we would have seen would have been in the kind of lower paid areas of the business, so rooms, housekeeping, and F&B. But you can see actually maybe we put a lot of focus in those areas of the P&L and strategies to mitigate the increase in costs related to those areas. But you've seen here areas of wellness and other labour costs here at 9.1% growth being the largest factor, and then property and maintenance there at the bottom as well. So two areas that had seen significantly more growth in labour costs than other areas of the business. Overall, there was a 1 percentage point increase in labour margin and a 1 percentage point decline in profit margin. So very much linked to each other, I believe. And then finally, from the expense point of view, because of course it's not only about the labour costs, we have trends that are hitting the industry. I didn't put insurance costs on here just a slightly separate issue. But again, another challenge for hotels, and of course, there's business rates below the P&L, below the GOP line in the P&L that we should probably spend some time on another discussion. For this one, for me, I thought it was quite interesting to highlight a few of those areas that are, just general trends in the industry. So IT system expenses, they're well above and beyond the increase that we've seen from a revenue perspective. Credit card commissions and loyalty programs you can see here. So as guests are spending more on their credit cards, and there's a whole trend towards using the loyalty programs that are more and more available in the industry. You can see the impact that will, of course, have as they grow further than the revenues. And sales and marketing expenses there in the middle. It's almost like if we combine the growth in loyalty programs and we're still spending a lot more in sales and marketing expenses, we are getting hit from from both sides. And that's on top of course, the booking costs that we're of course navigating as well. The utility cost we've seen as a drop off in 3.4%. Currently, it's predicted for 2026 that we'll see further drop in utility costs. But of course, that's still subject to the economic situation and the political situation as well in the Middle East in particular. And then if we look at the things that I think we should consider talking about and kind of reiterating some of the things I already mentioned there. So IT expenditure continues to grow as we spend more and have more focus in IT area of the building, but also as we move those services to cloud services and subscribe to the various different platforms from a SaaS point of view, you end up, of course, moving some of what would have been a CapEx cost into the P&L. So we see that over time developing. Some of the customer habits, as I mentioned, so it's not just credit cards and loyalty programs. Of course, there are other trends emerging of way the guests book hotels and spend money in hotels that, of course, impact us, and we probably need to stay at the front of. From a sales and marketing point of view, again, I still believe in this. We've moved from traditional sales to utilizing digital marketing as a key factor in the way that we go to market. And of course, now with the emergence of AI tools, again, that's maybe going to turn that on its head. And I don't believe we can do all three of these on top of each other whilst trying to navigate other cost growths as well. Labor, it's not just about the government mandated changes to national living wage and national insurance costs. We, of course, as an industry, have been fighting with other segments and other alternative industries that people who would be coming into hotels generally have the option of now. So that goes across the various issues, not just with the Brexit situation as well, with the ability for us to be able to hire from abroad, but also the emergence of hybrid working, and of course the various other remote options that people have. And then on top of that, we have the opportunities, I guess, which is as I said, leveraging the drop in energy costs as an area of opportunity for profitability in hotels, and of course the biggest one for me, driving ancillary growth, both opportunities now and as we get further tools from the automation and AI point of view, what we can utilize in the future as well. So for me, they're the main factors that I pulled out of the slides. But yeah, I guess we can go into a discussion.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yes, it's interesting what you're saying there about some maybe energy falling costs, but I think when we last did this webinar, it was all about cutting costs, and that's where all the focus was. I feel a bit of a change just generally in the industry, and it's less about cutting costs, probably because they can't be cut anymore, but more about looking for new routes for profitability and where you can generate more revenue where you just hadn't monetized before or just literally hadn't even considered the option. But the interesting one there, I think, especially for a lot of the HOSPA delegates that are here today, most of them will be focused on finance, but a lot of them will be IT as well. So it'd be interesting to talk a little bit more about that IT expenditure. And you said about moving to cloud. I've also heard, I assumed, having not actually been working in a hotel for a long time now, but that the going to cloud thing almost everyone was doing. But there seems to be quite a few people who are refusing to go to cloud and keeping it on premise as well. But Tina, what have you seen on your IT within Cairn hotels?
Yeah, and we've got a solid 3-year plan on IT, and we are moving to cloud. I think we're trying to build our tech stack for the future. We've got substantial investment in that area. And actually, where we have moved our PMSs into the cloud, it's really benefiting us. We're looking at, I think it's very difficult to not get your head turned with all of the new technology. And, we've got a business systems manager, and him and I could spend 40 hours a week looking at the next sort of excellent tech that's coming in that plugs straight into the cloud. Where we stand with it is we're building for the future. We're taking a really measured approach with it. So what do we actually need and what's going to benefit our guests, and approaching it from that way. But we are saving costs by moving the PMSs.
Yes, I think that's always good advice, isn't it? Don't be dazzled by a great salesman who's selling you something that looks great, but you don't need it. So yeah, that was very prevalent during the pandemic, when a lot of people were putting in systems that just quickly to solve the problem, and then big expense for a very small return, very short-lived. Mike, would you say what Tina said is typical of most hotels?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think there's a mixed bag here of like the industry in general lags behind other sectors when it comes to technology. I don't think we've ever shied away from that. I think there is a bit of what's the latest shiny thing, right? Like we want to be on board with that and not really having a proper tech strategy. I think most technology professionals will recognize that in the industry, that we've kind of got a lot of different systems. We actually have, I mean, from a data guy's point of view, like we have a lot of data in hotels, we're just not very good at pulling it together. And therefore we've invested in technology to try and, navigate some of the bridges between the various platforms. And I think for those that are now going to the next generation of technology, it's not just moving to cloud, it's everything that comes with it. Um, you can move to a new PMS, for instance, that offers cloud service, but if that doesn't then fit into your wider strategy, et cetera, then it doesn't really help you. And then there's just the sheer expense of it sometimes, right? You have like these challenges if you're in a group like Tina is, and of course even bigger than that, the brands, etc. There is the economies of scale, there's the technical expertise, but if you're in the independent sector, it's maybe a bit more challenging, and you have to, of course, utilize external consultants, etc., to be able to navigate it. But yeah, I think the two main factors is the accounting treatment, right, which is one angle of it. You don't have big servers sat in a room. You, of course, move into cloud services. Um, and then there's the other angle, which is, of course, making sure that it fits into a wider technology strategy.
Absolutely. Your second point was about customer habits and increased credit card or share of credit card spend and loyalty programs. I know that, in fact, one of the questions that we've already had in is about tips and service charge, and that has become a cost now to the business rather than before, when it usually the direct costs were taken out of the distribution, or not always, but some were. So I'd like to talk a bit more about that. But one of the questions, which is kind of related, that we've already got, says, what is the view about whether tips and service charge revenues and distribution should be included in the P&L accounts to ensure full transparency and facilitate margin benchmarking? So it's a little bit offside, but it may when I saw that one and I saw that we were, or decided we were going to be talking about credit card spend, I thought perhaps they were linked. So Mike, do you want to start with the tips and service charge and the P&L question, and then we'll go on to credit card spend and loyalty programs?
I mean, the only way I don't think directly linked is the fact that the way that people tip changes when, obviously, as there's much more credit card spend, and this is not like tips collected through cash and trunk. It's kind of more of you have this, the ability to be able to do it through credit cards. It does change the dynamic of how we handle this on site. Um, but it's an international issue. This is not just a UK issue, right? There are we deal with the Uniform System of Accounts. We actually sit on the panel of the Uniform System of Accounts. And this topic has come up quite a few times because if they're government mandated service charges, which of course the UK doesn't have, then they become part of revenues and the distribution becomes part of the costs. It sits in the P&L. And where that has happened in the various countries as we made those changes in whenever it was 2014, I guess. That impacted those countries quite dramatically, and it had wider impacts on the P&L. I actually think from a reporting point of view, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it does give you a much truer and clearer picture. But of course, it impacts things like your profitability and your revenues and how your revenues are handled, because it goes in at the top and therefore inflates your revenues. and it also inflates the cost lines later on, which is maybe how it should be seen, but it does then impact things like fees to brands and the various other angles that are linked to this. And it caused a lot of drama when we moved it to the new uniform system version in 2014. So yeah, I think from an accounting point of view, it makes some sense, but I think there is quite a bit to navigate there.
Yeah. Okay. So we get back on track. The increased cost you were showing there for credit cards and the growth of loyalty programs, does that ring true within the Cairn Hotel Group as well, Tina?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think when it comes to loyalty, we have a number of franchise brands, and one of the reasons we're working with them is because they've got such strong loyalty programs. So it's a welcome increase. However, and I think you pointed out earlier, Mike, we've got to temper the sales and marketing spend against the increased loyalty and be mindful of that moving forward. But yes, we do see it. People love loyalty programs, and we embrace it. We don't have an independent one, but it is something that we are looking at.
It's interesting with loyalty and sales marketing investment there. It was something that was cut, certainly the sales marketing during the pandemic, and those that didn't cut their marketing people so quickly reaped the rewards at reopening. So I think the role of a marketer has changed, I think, in my opinion, quite significantly. And I don't want to belittle the marketing people of years ago, but it seemed years ago was much more about just producing a lovely brochure. And I'm sure that was, that there was lots of strategy and tactics behind that as well. But it seems now to be a much, much more commercial role. And the marketing person, has a voice at board level usually.
Oh, absolutely. And we actually invested in our marketing team coming out of the pandemic, and it just continues to grow. And I think the way marketing is going to evolve over the next 2 years, especially with AI coming in and the decision making process people are taking. But yeah, it's fundamental, and it's not an area that we intend to cut down on. However, we will be very measured about where we spend. We don't want to spend twice in the same area.
No, and less probably on your own website and more on how AI will represent your
Completely,
hotels.
completely.
I was a part of a discussion yesterday that was saying that star ratings are just going to be irrelevant going forward
Yeah.
because it's all about the reputation and the influencers out there, what they're saying, rather
I think
than
it's already the case, right? Like I think in the
quite.
UK we still have a bit of it. Like when I travel internationally, it becomes much more of a the 4 or 5 star thing. But the reality is that when you're actually booking, you're not probably even looking at those things. You're looking at the reputation online. But I think
Absolutely.
it's clear. But well, I just go back to that last point, just to add one more thing on the when you look at I've pulled out a couple of expenses there. They're not the only ones that you pull from the trends. I just took out a couple of examples to talk about. Loyalty programs, credit cards are obviously one, are two of those. The way people book, so through the online channels, etc., that can all be, we could discuss that all day. But I think the reality of what I'm saying is we should be mindful of the emerging trends and not just ride them, but actually find a strategy that kind of maximizes the potential around them. Because if we just leave it as it is, you're going to be complaining about the deteriorating profitability and really challenged on on how we manage our hotels. Because we're just still doing the same things we always did, and then we're also, taking the expense and the deterioration of profits from the other side. I think it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yes, we've got a comment here about credit card costs and how they are increasing. So it says credit card costs as a percentage of net revenue over the last 2 years has moved from 1.7% to 2.2%. And this viewer today believes this reflects reward card costs passed on to merchants and digital payment channels. So that's yeah, it's just adding to more cost for the hotelier, isn't it? And hopefully there's some reward there. But yeah, tricky.
Just think as well in the UK, we're not that the credit card thing in if you're in the Middle East and definitely in the US, like people are obsessed with these credit cards that earn points, right? We do have
Yeah.
some of it in the UK through Amex and obviously the BA ones, etc. But it's not that much of a big thing here in the same way. But the world is moving that direction, and these things will become more and more of a challenge here.
Okay, we've got a query here. It says credit card commissions are one thing, but was the trend last year increased commission payments from OTA partners, etc.? So was that an increased cost as well? So commissions from OTAs, what's being seen there is this particular question.
Yeah, I think thanks for that, Lisa. I will have a quick look while we're chatting.
Okay.
The last time
Tina,
I checked,
while Mike's looking at these figures, have you got any further comments on credit cards or indeed sales marketing and loyalty?
I think, we are seeing the credit card increase. I think what's interesting is the wider use of Klarna as an option to prepay for your hotel stays or your events. So I think that's something we need to look out for in the future. And with regards to OTA commissions, I can't speak for Mike's stats, but from ours, we were fairly static last year.
Right. Mike, you
Yeah.
ready with your answer, or should we
yeah, I
move?
mean it's down no matter which way we look at it year on year. So from as a percentage of revenue, it's nearly half a percentage point, and on a per occupied room basis, it's down 6.7%. Um,
Okay,
just validate that, sorry.
that's fine.
Possibly just now in the UK market right now. Okay, right. So, okay, yeah, you were right. So sorry, just to correct what I was saying. So, as a percentage of revenue, it's basically flat from a per occupied room basis. It's like 0.2% up. So it's flat. Yeah, year on year.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
So I was in Amsterdam at the time. So if anyone wanted to know the Amsterdam numbers, you just got them as well for free.
Fab. Labour. Everybody's talking about labour and has been since the budget and the national insurance increases and now national minimum wage increases and national living wage as well, which is above inflation, which is tricky for some hospitality businesses, not all, as a lot of people were already certainly on the national minimum wage paying what they should have been paying and above that. But how is the labour market looking generally for you, Tina? Do you have people who still work from home? Do you have trouble recruiting? How is it looking as a whole on your group of hotels?
Yeah, so this is an area we've been focused on for the last year. We do have a little bit of hybrid working, but it's very difficult in hotels and on site. And we most of our commercial team are on property. I think when it comes to labour, yes, we are seeing rising costs, but we've taken a real stance as in we need to look after the people that are working with us because recruitment is costly. So we have a real people first focus happening, and that is very much around investing in the people we've got, looking at management training programs because look, hospitality can be a tough industry to work in, but equally, I think sometimes it's a bit of a calling, isn't it? Once you get into it, you fall in love with it. So we're working hard on taking those stars and really developing them through communicating with our people and doing all we can to sort of put ourselves out there as a great hospitality company to work for.
Well, yesterday again. I was at a conference at EY yesterday. This is where my facts and figures are coming from. There were investors and banks there, but having a discussion about where they should invest and where they will lend money to, and it came down to it does matter which flag you're flying. It does matter. Lots of things matter, but actually when it comes to it, what might look perfect on paper, if you haven't got the right staff in place, if you haven't got the right leadership actually on the ground, then the property won't be successful. So
Yeah.
I think your focus on labour couldn't be more spot on. I think that's terribly valid at the moment. But that has been a discussion for a very long time, labour costs, and I think as an industry, it will continue to be a challenge for us as we're looking to recruit. Although I think also general feedback is recruitment is the issue is less acute in recruitment than it has been, but it continues to be an issue. Perhaps freedom of movement will increase that if that actually does come to pass. The other big cost, although reducing, isn't it? The energy costs. So they really shot up, and now they're going back down. But how does that compare? Probably one for Mike. How do they compare now to how they were before all those big increases? Are we back to
Oh,
where we were before?
nowhere near it. No, no, no. This is more about the slowdown year on year. And of course, during that peak of 2023, the end of 2023, we saw, growths of up to like 300% on unit price, right? With some government subsidies. So again, as you've just pulled me up, well, I've got it live on screen. Let me just run the data. But we're nowhere near where we were. It's just more as we've had the challenge over the last few years, this has actually been our tailwind rather than our headwind, if you're comparing year on year. Of course, a chunk of the reason why we're so short of profit margin versus pre-COVID, for instance, is because of the utility costs for sure.
Yes, Tina, utilities for you. I know a lot of people are seeing savings where they've been able to put in some lovely green initiatives, but they take time sometimes to kick in. How is it for Cairn?
Yeah, I mean we've had our big savings, so we we've had the benefit, I would say. However, linking it into the green initiatives and sustainability, which is another big focus for us across the group, we are, I think, we're not doing it for the energy savings, but we are seeing a benefit from that when we're working around the carbon metrics and the sustainability policy. But that's not the sole reason for us running that.
Yes, I think that's a great sales point. We go off track a bit to talk about ESG.
Yeah.
It can be a cost, but the savings not only for the planet, but the savings should become apparent. And some of the larger agencies, especially, won't put business into hotels who aren't ticking the right boxes on that. So it should actually not be seen so much as an expense, and the energy
Mhm.
comes into play there. Mike, did you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things to add. The first thing is we're collecting sustainability data now, as of this month. So we've gone out asking for consumption data as part of the uniform system changes, and of course that will enable us now to look at, what not just the cost of things from a total cash point of view, but also, what operators have done from a consumption point of view, and also assess the pricing, because of course we have the total cost, we have the consumption. That means we can now look at the average pricing, etc. But if you look at it versus 2019 full year, the UK has seen an increase of 50% overall in energy costs, right? The total impact of that on a percentage of revenue terms is 1 percentage point. Um, and we are 3 percentage points down in margin versus 2019. So 1 percentage point of that directly, you can obviously calculate that yourselves. It's 1 percentage point of the 3 percentage points comes directly from utilities.
It'll be really interesting to look at these figures on business rates as well, possibly in our next update, see how, because obviously we had a bit of reduction after COVID, but they're shooting back up if we don't get any intervention from government other than the pubs. But that will be interesting to see where we sit there, sort of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic and over the last few years. But I don't want to get us off track on business rates because we'll never stop. So there's a question here from one of our visiting delegates today. You touched on ancillary revenue categories and the growth for different categories above 10% in some cases. And the question here, I think it's a bit of an open-ended question, difficult to answer, but how big an opportunity is ancillary revenue for hotels? Well, that's definitely how long is a piece of string question. But I think it is a very valid one in that the ancillary revenues need to be increased because, as you said at the very beginning, it's less about cutting costs and more about finding new revenue streams. Would you say, Tina, that's a focus for you, or do you think you've already exhausted all your additional revenue options?
No, I think it's an absolute focus for us. What we're trying to do is look at things differently, and I think we're in hospitality hotels we're used to including dinner, bed, breakfast, and perhaps parking, and it is what it is. What we're trying to do is look at what will make guests have the better experience, and what would they be prepared to pay for. So we've split it down into different markets. So we've really looked at the family market and what is the standard family market, and if you're traveling with children, what's going to make that stay an experience or make life easier for you. And we're doing very much the same with pet stays. And I think the other one, and it's on Mike's PowerPoint, is wellness. And there's a huge focus on wellness. And we always think wellness is related to spa hotels. And I think we're trying to lift that out of just the spa hotels, and how can we create extra revenue, driving that wellness piece into a bed and breakfast offering in the city centre. So there's lots of different, I mean, none of it is going to double the top line, but all of it will make a difference. And I think TrevPAR is a huge area we're looking at. It's not just about ADR or RevPAR.
No, and hopefully those new revenues will sort of help the bottom line if they are completely new revenues as well.
Well, and Yeah, and the other thing is in the wellness piece, I learned the other day that bone broth is one of the best forms of collagen. So, when you're talking about what are people prepared to spend money on when you're dining with us or in hotels, you know, how do we move away from the bog standard menu and how do we include that wellness piece in your menu offering? And will people pay for it? I truly believe they will.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, and it's great to look at different opportunities like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I think you focused on golf and leisure, and I think car parking featured as well, didn't it, as a new growth area? Maybe not on these slides, maybe ones I've seen previously. But are these where else are you seeing ancillary revenue growth?
Personally, I think if we were going to spend the rest of this conversation talking about anything, it would be this, right? I just think there is so much. And the thing, I was at Tina's event a few weeks back, actually, at the Cairn Group GM's conference. And for me, this was like such an important topic. Like, if you get everyone around the room with a whiteboard and you start thinking about where the opportunities are, um, and actually come up with some really cool ideas. Sorry, can you hear that dog barking in the background?
You
Oh,
can
that's
carry
fine.
on, it's fine.
So yeah, we get like there are so many things that come to the table really quickly, right? So even if literally if we were just talking about like in a very short space of time where the opportunities are, if you don't have a golf course, golf revenues are a bit difficult to kind of you might put a simulator in, you might look at putting crazy golf in around the car park area or the green area, whatever it is, but generally it's going to be pretty tricky for you to have extensive to capitalize on that trend. And I would say as well, by the way, we spoke quite a bit about the negative trends or the perceived negative trends from a P&L point of view. The positive trend is that guests really do spend more money on property, both they're spending more on average rate and they're spending more on ancillary services than they were in 2019, right? So the move towards actually spending money, if you make it available to them, and you give them a reason to spend it, they will spend it. So the other areas that I've seen, for instance, the most obvious ones are like upsells at at front office and pre-check-in. So I was speaking to a few operators last week who have put good incentive plans back in for the staff. So yes, labor costs are a challenge, but let's pay them even more and tie it to performance. There's of course you have the likes of Oki and FPG who I was speaking to last week. Again, these platforms are quite exciting, right? Because they actually provide the service, the platforms will actually concentrate on these areas. And you give a tool to the ops guys that are actually a bit more than just, upselling breakfast or your boring all-day dining restaurant. Maybe bone broth is one of the options, right? But you have things that customers are, if we know there's a trend in that area and we know we can capitalize on it. I've used examples of upselling on reception of like the smallest little things. That I think are, just incremental to your stay that you can enjoy like the airlines do. I was speaking to another company the other day, which I thought was a really good idea. But, basic, but like there's a company out there called, I'm going to say Fresh Bed. And you'll thank me at some point for even mentioning them. But, they're based out of the Netherlands. And the reason they were speaking was they wanted some data. But as I was talking to them, they're trying to think about ideas in the industry of how they could track it and how it would become a thing. And there's other providers of this, obviously. But they do like the best mattresses, right? They do these mattresses that have like a layer of air conditioning and like almost guaranteed sleep. And then when we did a webinar with an operator, they were talking about this, and the operator was going, yeah, you could have even like an economy hotel or a select service hotel could have one or two rooms that have this kind of enhanced sleep experience that is an upgradable feature that if you're a business person, like someone like me who's flown in for one night and has a presentation in the morning, I need to almost guarantee my sleep. I don't need the noise, the light, or an uncomfortable bed. Like I would pay for the upgrade, right? I don't know how much more it would cost me, but it'd be worth upgrading. Or I go to a better hotel. Um, and I feel like we can do this in hotels, right? There's expense linked to it, but there's also, you're riding on a revenue trend, which is linked to the wellness thing. It doesn't have to be a golf club or a spa. Sorry, that was my
Absolutely.
ramble, I know, but quite
I
passionate.
think I also the sort of rise. in some sectors in prepayment for the hotel stay as well means that when people arrive on site, they've already spent the cost is gone, so they're willing to pay more. So because it seems as a new cost rather than just adding to one big bill at the end. And I've heard revenue managers for years say the good revenue managers who are looking beyond just bedrooms, that they do need the whole hotel team. Meetings and events is the really obvious one, but your receptionists, your waiting staff, whoever it might be, just doing that little bit of upsell and incentivizing them to do that. It's a win-win, isn't it? If you get more money from the guest and you give a commission to whichever member of staff that was, that's got to be
Yeah,
an
can
opportunity.
I throw a question at Tina?
Yeah.
One that I think is a little bit controversial sometimes, but we know that guests are walking out of the door. They might have breakfast outside the hotel. They can order Uber Eats. They can, they can do all of these things that I guess weren't trends a while back. They're quite often not eating a boring all-day dining restaurant or a cafe. What's your view on package rates? Like we used to do a lot of this in the industry, right? So you're tying in your kind of dinner, bed and breakfasts, etc. These days, you're lucky if there's even a breakfast option. Like we seem to not want to secure the revenue before they arrive, is the way I would look at it as a consumer, although I understand the revenue management concept. But what's your view?
Okay, so I actually really like package rates if they're costed correctly, if they are packaged correctly, because really a package rate should be an experience that you're selling, not just a couple of combined areas. So I think if they're used at the right time, distributed through the right channels, because depending on where you're distributing them, they can come at a super high cost of sale and they're planned out. I'm good with package rates.
Interesting. You get a real mixed bag of responses on that one.
Yeah.
I've done this in big forums, and they kind of the response is often mixed because I don't know. There's a whole link back to not just profitability, but also driving the ADR, and going for the kind of Ryanair model of you book your basic rate and then you layer everything on top. But it has disadvantages, right? Because if you don't package it, quite often people won't then take it.
Yeah, and I think it does depend on the type of hotel, your location, as to whether you would go down that route or not. But certainly, in probably about half of our portfolio, we use package rates. We plan them out a year and ahead, and when managed and monitored, and also we're working with the chefs on the food allocation and making sure that everybody's bought into the package rate. And sometimes, when people are buying it it drives that it does drive that experience level, but also it tells them what they can have and it saves them going off and trying to find somewhere and booking Ubers and taxis. So you're laying it out marketed right, they can be super useful.
I'd like to see the impact if a company was assessed on its TrevPOR performance, right? So instead of ADR, the total revenue per occupied room performance, how much that mind shift would how much of that would change in the industry, right? Because people all of a sudden incentivized and performance managed on the on the total revenue picture. I think quite often one of the challenges is that revenue managers in particular are targeted on RevPAR and therefore like maximizing the ADR that they get out of a guest rather than maximizing the total package is part of the problem.
Yeah, and I think coming back on that, we work in a commercial environment, and it is very much the three departments working together. So it's not just about one area because that's what's going to make the difference for us. It's you can have the best ADR on a Tuesday night, but if you sat empty on a Sunday, it's no good for everybody. So fully agree.
A query here from one of your ex-colleagues, actually, Mike. Is there a movement towards being able to add a RevPAG, so revenue per available guest metric in the future? Do you think the industry will embrace that, pick that up and work with it?
My ex-colleague, I'm gonna guess that's Catherine, is it?
Yeah, it is, Catherine.
So yes, and Catherine quite rightly has been flying the flag for that for the last couple of years as well. I think we've never really been able to get reliable guest data. I'd say it's not really a global issue, it's an American issue. They just don't have the same kind of tracking of this information that we have in the rest of the world, because obviously for fire regulations, etc., we have to capture how many guests you have in the hotel here. In the Middle East, you have to have a passport for every single person who steps foot in a bedroom. But of course, in the US, there's quite often it just defaults to one guest. So we've struggled with this, but the emergence of the sustainability data and the change of the uniform system has evolved some of that. So we've struggled to get square meterage and total guest nights. And both of those we've started collecting as of January. We're in a much stronger situation now. So for us, the implementation of those metrics that we get on the output of that will happen after the end of Q3. So once we've got all the data in, it's been reconciled, and we have the sustainability data, we will then be able to do things like revenue per square meter and revenue per guest.
I'd love to pick up on the package rate and talk about the tourist tax, but I think we're going to run out of time. So I think we might have to come back to that on a completely separate webinar, which it probably warrants anyway, because if for the new Edinburgh one, that's going to cause problems when we have packages. There
Jane,
is a
can I
comment.
just make a comment though quickly
Yeah,
on
go,
that?
go.
Because I thought that would come up at some point, and we had this question at the Cairn conference as well, right? And like I just think that we should take a view on this sometimes about how we can make the most out of the tourism like charges that are being collected. So like places like Dubai, for instance, that have done it. I admit the UK is not Dubai, right? But um, they've always charged the tourism charge from day one. And that goes into a kitty that they then use to advertise Dubai as a destination for tourism. The UK has just never really done that in the same way, right? Although we have various other taxes, this one's very targeted and spent 100% back into tourism advertising. And I think where markets have done this, there's some really good examples of where they've been super successful with it. And the UK, driving the UK as a place to come to visit, and the individual cities like Edinburgh. Edinburgh is one of the fastest growing markets in Northern Europe, right? That maybe, will just accelerate that growth and help continue it. So I don't think it's always a negative as long as we can manage it.
I'm scared of going down this rabbit hole because I think we could be at it for a long time. But the
Yeah,
problem, say for Manchester, I believe, putting it straight back into Visit Manchester and the local tourism. I'm not quite sure the plan is still exactly the same for Edinburgh. And the complication, two points actually, is that if it's a package rate, the percentage is only on the bedroom element, and we don't necessarily want the guest to know what we're doing behind the scenes and allocating. And the second point is I've heard the argument a lot about overseas and tourist tax and whatever they're doing. The difference is, and UK hospitality here are trying to reduce the VAT rate for hospitality. I fear that will never happen. I applaud the fact that they're trying to do it, but I don't think it will happen. But they do have that in Europe. So whilst they have a reduced VAT, and then they can add the tourist tax on, we're high on both, and I think that's potentially an issue. But I think we have to cut it there on tourist tax, otherwise we'll never stop. We'll be here till midnight. So I've got a comment here about the incremental spend from one of our HMA members, actually. Really interesting conversation about incremental spend. We have recently partnered with a wellness brand and we sell candles in the hotel. It adds to the guest experience and gives them something tangible to take home. Connecting the experiences is something they can take home and helps drive repeat stays. So there's another idea for people who are thinking they haven't got any options that they can do at their hotel because they don't have any options. There's those. I've got a question here specifically on room service, and I remember Mike us talking about room service during the pandemic when we were desperately looking for positive news, and room service was it. The question is room service a loss-making necessity or should we outsource it? Do you do room service, Tina, in your
We
hotels?
do, yeah, we do in some of our hotels, but not in all of them. And actually, it's a big topic of discussion for us at the moment. Um, I think as an individual traveller, it's a great option to have available, but it's how we can manage it and benefit it to the guest without adding into the cost line. So I wouldn't like to lose room service in some of our properties. I think it's an absolute need. And if you don't offer it, all you're going to do is, have deliveries coming through from Uber Eats and yeah. So we just need to nail down and make it right and work for us.
Is there a trend, Mike, on room service that you've picked up at all?
Well, only that we're back down to the pre-pandemic kind of levels of revenue generation, but I think this is linked to some of what Tina's saying there is the fact that hoteliers have actively decided against it because it's seen as not so profitable. I just think that there are certain basics in hotels. When I stay in a hotel and they don't have room service, it just really frustrates me because I could go down to reception or go to the restaurant, I could get my food and I could walk up to the room with it and just eat in my room, which is what people want to do these days, right? If you're on your own single traveler and you don't want to eat in the all-day dining restaurant, you get the choice of Uber Eats, whichever delivery service suits you. And a lot of people like to sit on their own now, right? So like if that's a trend and people are going to be on their own, they're going to want food in their room. Why don't we just go hell for leather on it and do it really well and maximize it so it makes money, rather than this cut and cut, this constant cutting off the edges.
Mm.
I think it's different if you don't provide food in the hotel, right? So like if you don't have an F&B downstairs, and obviously providing room service is not really a thing, and then you should outsource it. But in the US, I can tell you, I could stay in a top end Marriott hotel or whatever. I could book the room service. So I go onto the QR code, I click on it, the food arrives. I have no idea until it arrives, by the way. When it arrives, I can kind of see it. But during the booking process, I have no idea that it's come from an outside partner. It's not been actually prepared in the hotel. So I think there are other options.
Mm.
I've seen five-star hotels in London that have a little sign at the front saying that the Uber Eats drivers or delivery, whoever it might be, are to go in the back entrance. So they're accepting them into
Mm.
five-star hotels as long as they don't wear their motorbike helmets through the lovely foyer. Now, I did promise we'd be finished before 11. So one last question. Are there things, Tina, you are doing differently now than you were at the beginning of 2025, so this time last year?
Okay, so not doing differently, but perhaps focusing more on would be our team and our people, as I mentioned at the start. We are looking, we've spent a lot of time with Mike, so we are also looking and have a huge focus on ancillary revenue, which we've kind of dipped our toe in the past. And we are investing in marketing.
Yeah. So the points actually that we
Yeah.
have covered, and yeah, that does seem to be a growing trend across the
Yeah.
UK. Any closing comments from you, Mike? Anything you want to add before we let our listeners get back to their email?
No, I think this is for me the whiteboarding, the white paper review process I think is really useful. So I really suggest that we have the data to help you kind of look at the picture and the emerging trends for the various markets, which I think is we can of course support with. But the reality is the idea generation and just if we can get a bit more creative and exciting in our hotels, I think that is already going to be a revenue generating point. I saw the question, by the way, on the OTAs. Jane, I don't think we addressed that one, did we, on the price
No.
parity battle? I actually would love to get my head back into that because the last I saw, 2024, the EU banned it, right? So Booking.com dropped it as far as I was aware in the EU. Um, I'm not sure how that impacted the non-EU countries. But yeah, as far from last thing I saw, they were kind of banned from actually applying rate parity as a clause in the contracts. But yeah, maybe it's worth us having another discussion on.
Another one. Yeah. So the question there was, have there been any developments on the price parity battle with the OTAs? I think actually realistically that's got to be a completely different
Yeah.
Yeah.
seminar as well, webinar as well. So much to talk about. But thank you, Michael, and thank you, Tina. Some really, really useful insight there and comments. And also from our very engaged audience today. So thank you very much for all of your questions and involvement there. All very appreciated. As always, as I say at the end of these webinars, if you need any formal advice or data specific to your property, then please approach your professional advisors or come to me at HOSPA for a referral. And if you'd like an introduction to Mike at HotStats or Tina at Cairn Hotels, then please let me know and I'll be happy to connect you. Also, would you please take a look at hospa.org for other upcoming events? We have another webinar next week talking about change management in hospitality, where I'll be talking to Francisco Ventura from Sunborn London about his digital transformation, including replacing both his PMS and point of sale solutions. And he's got nice, happy tales to tell about that, although I don't think it's ever a completely smooth route. We also have our quiz night at the end of February. There's a couple of tables left to sell for that, so that should be fun. That's in London. We'll be celebrating our professional development graduates in March, and we have a members meeting in Edinburgh on the 17th of March. So if you are based further north, then please consider coming along to see us all in Edinburgh on the 17th. It's all on our website. Also on the website, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can find recordings of all of our webinars and masterclasses, and they're also on our YouTube channel. And today's webinar should be uploaded within the next few days, hopefully by the end of the week, if not the very beginning of next. But thank you all very much for listening, and a big thank you to both Mike and Tina, who I think have had some great discussion here today, and it's very welcome and very timely. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of the week, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.